Welcome everybody to the last layer of the obscure Mario games, Iceberg. I am Gambito Gaming, your host. Today we're talking about the most rare and obscure Mario games that the world knows about. Most of the games we're going to talk about today are Japanese exclusive limited release games and also several Mario themed arcade games. I know we've talked about a few in the past few videos, but today we're really hitting the arcade scene, guys. When it comes to finding the rarest Mario games, after all, we do have to reach into the depths of the internet to even find a little information on these games. So yeah, we're really getting down and dirty on this one, guys. Anyway, let's go ahead and get started with layer 8. Yakuman DS is a Mario-themed Mahjong game that released in Japan exclusively on the Nintendo DS. The game was only released in Japan as Mahjong is obviously pretty big over there, but this game was actually a very specific Japanese version of Mahjong known as Riichi Mahjong. This version of Mahjong has become more popular within pop culture versions of Mahjong like anime and video games. This version is basically the same rule set and idea of Mahjong, but adds in things like Dora to enhance the strategy and gameplay of the overall experience of Mahjong. Without going too much further into the nerdy details of Guy Ritchie's Mahjong, let's move on to the why this game is actually Mario themed. The game features Mario-themed characters that you go against in competitive Mahjong. Each character has a star rating for how many cops they've killed in Vice City, and it also just so happens to correspond to how good they are at the game of Mahjong. Those two lines are pretty parallel. Each character also has different attributes and ways they play the game. For example, Bowser Jr. skillfully waits in an unexpected tile, which sounds like exactly what this little fucking snake would do. The game features 6 playable characters and a large cast of Mario characters you can go against along your Mahjong adventure to become, you know, the Mahjong master.
Ain't no fucking way, boy.
This game was also stacked full of content, giving 5 different modes to play Mahjong, even with an online component coming a little after the game's initial release in a separate release known as Wi-Fi Taio Yakuman DS. Man, that's a mouthful of marbles right there, guys. I think if you're super into Mahjong, this is a pretty cool edition of the game, but since it was never translated and is pretty hard to get, I'd probably just stick with the computer versions of the game, especially if you're over here in the States. Perhaps in the future we'll get a port of the game similar to how we did with maybe like Mario Super Picross, but that's doubtful, as I can't see a lot of Americans taking the time to learn Riichi Mahjong, and that's just speaking as one myself. I barely know Mahjong itself. This shit looks complicated, I'm not gonna lie, it looks like a goddamn Yakuza minigame. Itadaki Street on the Nintendo DS was the first iteration and release of Fortune Street on the Wii. This game is a smaller, simpler version of Fortune Street, but features similar Monopoly-style gameplay as Fortune Street did. The game was being developed by Square Enix and was released exclusively in Japan. Similar to Fortune Street, the game also features Dragon Quest characters as part of the cast, alongside, of course, the Mario crew. The game boasts an impressive 23 characters to play as in 14 different stages across both the Super Mario and Dragon Quest universes. The gameplay of the game is very similar to Fortune Street, in which you want to buy properties, and when other players land on those properties, they pay you, much like Monopoly. The game has a lot more to it than that, but that's just the basic gist of it. Again, not going to get nerdy with it. The game also features a few mini-games, but unlike, say, Mario Party, this isn't the main attraction of the game, as there are only a few to choose from here. Plus, these mini-games aren't exactly a place to showcase, say, skill. Rather, there are chance mini-games that if you're lucky enough, you can win benefits from. Think of the minigame Day at the Races in Mario Party as a good comparison for all these mini-games. You have no idea if you're going to win the minigame, but hey, at least it was fun yelling at your pick. You know, get a fucking flame under his ass. You stupid ass boo. If you're in these type of like property owning games, the easier one to experience I think is Fortune Street, since it got an international release. But this one does have the charm of being the first game in its series, and also is one of the most chock full DS games I've ever seen in terms of content. Definitely one that might have done decently if it had been regionally released, especially back on the DS era. Bubu Mario sounds like Baby Mario took a pretty nasty spill out of Mario's arms when he was a newborn, but in reality, it's actually just a Mario game. Bubu Mario is a combination of video game and those old school kid machine rides you see outside of like a Food Lion or some shit in the 90s. This thing was a giant car that kids could hop in and play a small mini game that acted as the main attraction for the ride. Or I guess the main attraction is the giant shiny car with Mario characters on it. But my point is, there's a small game that you can play inside this thing. Think of this as an early version of the Luigi's Mansion arcade machine, where you can't tell if the game's cooler or just the fact that the thing actually fucking exists. The main gameplay of Bubu Mario I can't say that seriously, man. The main gameplay of Bubu Mario consists of 2 buttons, each makes the corresponding character jump, either Mario or Yoshi. The game is extremely simple and easy, guys. And listen, I'm not just saying that because the demographic is kids, but because the game will actually just beat itself even if kids don't do anything with the buttons. A Mario game that beats itself, huh? I haven't seen that since. Overall, much like slot machines and other arcade machines we've talked about thus far, this thing is cooler for the novelty sake of it, and less for the actual gameplay of Bubu Mario. Who's speedrunning Bubu Mario nowadays? If you've ever been the person that goes into the arcade or Dave & Buster's and plays the machines only for the points and not for the fun of the arcade, then this next entry was crafted just for you. Super Mario Fushigi no Janjan Land was a Japan-exclusive metal arcade game that was themed after Super Mario Bros. 3, specifically the Game Boy Advance version of that game. If you don't know, metal games are these type of arcade games where they take tokens or medals to play, and you can win more medals from the game just by playing it. You gotta spend money and make money. That type beat. These are popular in Japan as they have pretty strict gambling laws there, and they can't be traded back for cash in many places and can only be used to play more games that take this currency. These are pretty simple in design as you use the tokens you inserted to attempt to knock other tokens into different parts of the machine. These will actually end up giving you power-ups in the Mario version of the game and will help you end up earning more tokens in the long run. This specific metal game features a few small mini games in which you can rack up your winnings pretty quickly here. One is where you have to race a Koopa, and if you beat them, you get points for every medal dropped in the lower field. Another one sees the player trying to make Mario jump as much as possible by hitting medals into the corresponding hole. Things like this make the game feel even more like a Mario game, so this version is definitely a good version of this style of arcade game, you know, compared to like, I don't know, the shitty pirate themed ones nobody touches at every arcade ever. The game actually evolved into a multiplayer version in later iterations known as Super Mario Fujigi no Kokiri Party. I fucked that up, I know I did. The second one, and Mario Party Fushigi no Kakarou Catcher. These all play in the same fashion as one another, but they are all able to be played in multiplayer, and each take on a different theme from a different Mario game each. They technically probably could, you know, count each as separate obscure Mario games, but since they are all so similar in gameplay, I thought I'd just group them up for the same entry. Sorry, metal game fans, I gotta keep this train moving after all. Undoukai 30 was a pretty simple Super Famicom puzzle game that released exclusively in Japan back in the 90s. The game was being developed by Hudson Soft and saw a physical release as well as a Satellaview broadcast version, which was actually the more common way for people to play since the physical ROM was a very limited release. The game is a pretty simple match 2 or more game and is kind of a very early version of Puzzle and Dragon Super Mario Bros. We talked about in the first video, at least in terms of gameplay anyway. However, unlike in that game, this game doesn't automatically clear the combos when they fall. Instead, the player must click on the combo when they see it has 2 or more connections on the graph. A small adjustment in gameplay, but it's very noticeable when you see gameplay of it because I've been so conditioned by all of these app versions of these Connect 2 games or Connect 3 games that I just expect these things to auto-clear when they touch. There's not much else to really say about the game as it was designed to be a very simple, small puzzle game, and for what it is, it's pretty decent. The visuals are nice and the overall presentation feels pretty good to me for the time. I gotta say though, the Mario head in the puzzle is kind of giving me the Ouija vibes. Oh god. S&D test is a casualty from the huge Nintendo leak that happened back in 2020 and was discovered inside a test SFX demo for the Super Nintendo. The game can be found by scrolling through the different options of the SFX demo, and the game can be played by selecting numbers 11 through 14, which are left blank on the menu. S&D Test isn't much of a game, but does feature a small, very early gameplay level from what is assumed to be Super Mario World. The game actually features some very, very early versions of some of the enemies we can run across in Super Mario World, like this guy who I can only assume would turn into the cape guy you get the cape power-up from in Super Mario World. The demo is super simple and doesn't play that well, as it wasn't meant to be more than just to test the basics for the Super Nintendo. My favorite part of the game is the small boiled peanut enemy guy that chases Mario around on the ground. Look at this little dude. I don't know if these guys were supposed to be the Galoombas in the game or what, but they definitely didn't make it into Super Mario World, which is a damn shame. The demo is an interesting look into what probably was the very first draft of Super Mario World, which is rare to see for games nowadays, but especially for classic games such as these. This was a pretty cool entry to see. Super Mario Collection screensaver is exactly what it sounds like it is, guys. It's an HD remake of Super Mario 64. We finally got it, yes! No more complaining. Nah, I wish. But it's actually a computer screensaver application that was released in Japan for versions of Windows 3.1 and Windows 95. That's right, as if these old-ass operating softwares didn't run like shit already. Let's get the Mario Bros in here to literally start fucking up shit on your computer screen.
Delete. Get it off my computer. See ya.
The application came with quite a few screensavers, which all offer pretty unique Mario scenes not seen outside of the application. If I had to complain about something, it's the animation quality here. It's not the best, and I can't tell if it's due to the limited resources the devs had, or if it's just the processors of these old computers. They could only output something like this, I guess. The main use of this application was to pimp out your computer with the latest Mario screensavers, but there was also wallpapers, guys, and a clock, and even a fucking calculator. It's definitely not the worst version of these programs I've ever seen, and overall it gets done what it needs to get done for a cheap screensaver software, you know. Unlike the cheap McDonald's watch games we talked about in the last video, the next watch game we're talking about was made as a singular product with the sole expectation to play the original Super Mario Bros. On a Neslonic watch. I've shared my opinions on these watches before, and to summarize, I think they're kind of hot garbage, I'm gonna be honest. However, for this specific watch, it's actually pretty involved. The proof is sitting right here in the controller for the watch, as it features 4 buttons instead of the simpler 2-button controls these games typically have. Even though it's based on the first Super Mario Bros., it plays actually more like the original Donkey Kong arcade game. Mario is supposed to climb through 3 different tiers, which are supposed to act as levels, and each tier differs slightly in gameplay to make it up to Koopa Dragon, otherwise known as Bowser. Even though it's a bit more involved for a watch game, it's still extremely simple and not a great representation of the original Super Mario Bros. The worst part about this is the shoddy paint jobs surrounding the watch itself that, honestly, a lot of these watches had back in the day. Compared to other watch games and even other Mario watch games, the surrounding casing art for this one is pretty fucking bad. I don't know if it's just because they wanted to paint the designs, but the canvas was too small, so they just ended up looking shoddy as hell. The packaging can't even get it right. They'd use as a Super Mario Bros. 2 art from the box art of the game. So it seems like this thing didn't know what the fuck it wanted to be. You know, regardless of all that, this is a rare and unique Mario game that is even harder to find than some of the real Mario games out there. Would you rather take a Neslonic Super Mario Bros. Watch or a copy of Mario Party 7? I don't know, guys. Both are probably the exact same amount of money. Mario Factory is 2 things, guys. It is a game that helped developers at HAL learn and produce their own Super Famicom games, and it was also a video arcade hub for Mario-themed arcade games located in Japan. I want to talk about both today, but first let's talk about the game, since, you know, this is a list of Mario games after all. Mario Factory, the game, was developed for something known as the game processor, which was a device that allowed younger, less skilled developers to grasp the basics of programming and end up producing amateur Super Nintendo games. One of these programs was known as Mario Factory, and this supposedly set up a more user-friendly game creation environment for these younger developers inside this application known as Mario Factory. Since it was never released to the public and was used pretty rarely throughout Nintendo's game development in the 90s, there isn't much beyond this patent image that was leaked online of proof of Mario Factory actually existing. Other than that, I think it's unlikely we'll ever see much of this game or software, whatever you want to call it, as it wasn't even meant to be seen by the public in the first place, so I doubt we're going to see anything much more of it from here on out. Let's go ahead and move on to the place known as Mario Factory. This was a large video arcade that had a host of attractions, including its own Mario-themed food court. This was a very limited arcade back in the day, and there have only ever been 2 that have been confirmed to exist, both shutting down in 2011. This arcade hosted a bunch of arcade games we're going to be talking about throughout the rest of this iceberg, so I thought I'd cover this place up top here. Due to it being a pretty rare place to even go to for information, it's even more scarce for what all was inside Mario's Factory. We do know from a few photos and videos that they hosted some Nintendo events here, even one where they covered a new Super Mario Bros. Event back in the day. The idea of a fully themed Mario arcade doesn't sound super impressive nowadays since, you know, the Super Mario World and Universal Parks opened up since, but back in the day, this must have been a treat for any Nintendo fans out there, especially in Japan. If I was a 10-year-old Japanese kid and I wandered into there, man, I might still be there to this day. I would have lived in there like that dude who got stuck in Jumanji or some shit. But I'm volunteering. I'm not accidentally getting stuck in there. Anyway, let's dive into some of the games that were inside of Mario's Estranged Factory. One of the first machines we'll cover that was featured in Mario's Factory isn't technically a game, but is still worth covering in my opinion. The machine is known as Super Mario World No Popcorn Hanabaki. It basically dispenses popcorn, but in a cooler Super Mario themed way. Ooh, there he is, the big red man. Nah, this one is just pretty much a vending machine, but there's a likely chance that this one featured in the pictures was the only one of its kind, and the only one of these machines to exist, making this one of the most rare Mario products out there. The machine would have likely featured a small minigame akin to the Sega Sonic popcorn machines, also prominent in Japan. Although considering there doesn't seem to be a screen attached to the machine, perhaps the gameplay came from the Yoshi attachment that seems to have a wheel and some kind of buttons to control it. If anyone has any more information about this machine, let us know in the comments below, because as it stands right now, I've only found a few blogs talking about the machine online, and that's it. If you guys knew what Mario Mix Dance Dance Revolution was from the first video, then you may be surprised to find out it's not the only rhythm-based Mario game out there. That is because in Japan, specifically in Mario Factory, a DDR-style machine known as Mario Undokai was playable. The game was geared more towards a kid audience, so it's a bit more easy to play than a more pro-level DDR machine, or even DDR Mario Mix for that matter, which I heard it from some of you guys that the game was very easy. So that's saying a lot. This is also because you're not exactly dancing with this machine, but rather playing mini games that support the dance pad. It's kind of a little confusing, so let's just delve into some of the mini games. So this machine being this big and clunky makes a little bit more sense. First we have is the sports mini-games that appear on the machine, where the player can compete against the Koopalings in a variety of Olympic-style sporting events. For example, there's a 100-meter dash, a hurdling contest, and what looks like to be a discus toss. The second set of minigames includes more intelligence-based gameplay instead of physical. These include a memory game, a flag matching game, and even a quiz game where it asks the player different questions to progress on the Super Mario World theme map behind Luigi here. Also, Luigi's coming clean heavy in this mode, bruh. He's got a clean piece on him, so everyone knows who's boss, alright? He already had to fire a few warning shots at Toadsworth for being a fucking creep, alright? Lastly, there is a rock, paper, scissors-esque game where you go mano-a-mano with Princess Peach. This is like those Red Dead games, Five-Finger Filet, but Princess Peach is here. There's also a weird game that features Mario guarding a small can from booze. What's in the can, Mario? Is it the secret Mario family spaghetti sauce recipe everyone's been after for years? Why don't you move your foot there, Mario? If you know what's good for you, punk. I got my main man Luigi here. He's heavy. After playing the many different games this machine offered, it would dispense one of 24 trading cards that are unique solely to this machine and Mario Factory. So by proxy, right, these have to be some of the rarest trading cards to exist in the world. Move over, PSA 10 Charizard, there's a new $1,000 hitter in the building. It's a fucking picture of a Koopa. Overall, this machine is super impressive and is one of the first arcade machines I've seen that I'm honestly pretty jealous I didn't get a chance to experience growing up. And now nobody will get to experience them, as these machines are super rare and haven't been seen a lot since the closing of Mario Factory, making it one of the most obscure and rare Mario games out there. It's worth noting that all of the games inside of Mario Factory, including Bubu Mario, were developed by the same company known as Banpresto in Japan, and they were known for making these machines and also making some of the most iconic Mario plushies throughout the years. Some of these that I grew up with, guys. This company ended up having quite a few of these obscure Mario arcade machines under their belt, and one of the more obscure ones is known as Koopa Taiji. This wasn't so much a video game, but rather a ball-tossing arcade game where your goal is to wallop King Koopa right in his shit-eating grin. It's unknown exactly where this one appeared and if it actually made an appearance in Mario's Factory, but it's been confirmed to be in a location known as Tokyo Tower in Japan. The main source of information we have and most people have on this game is from a blog post. I'll actually link it down below, which is basically just an accumulation of all the information that anyone has ever had on these Banpresto arcade machines since they were so rare. And these photos all come from one machine that was found in Tokyo Tower for Koopa Taiji. The game is in pretty good condition, all things considered, especially since it was released in the 90s. However, there's some pretty obvious wear on the Bowser part of the machine, as the goal was to try and knock the shit out of this guy. Well, guess what? Over the years, it actually fucking killed him. These guys were pretty brutal to our boy Bowser here. Jesus, just knock the axe off and knock him in the lava. It's way more humane. Besides the game being super simple, we can find some strange oddities on the game's art. For example, the characters Iggy and Lemmy have different hair colors than in the canon of Super Mario World. This may be just based on the fact these guys change hair colors more than someone running from the feds, but it's always in the strangest of places. For example, you can find several pieces of merch throughout the years where at least one of the Koopa's hair is a different color. Other than that, the machine kind of speaks for itself, honestly, and is pretty simple, but it's worth noting since it was so rare and obscure. Televidenoir Super Mario World was yet another Banpresto arcade machine that released in Japan in the early 90s. The machine is a bit more unique than the other Banpresto arcade machines released, as this one utilized a telephone booth style arcade machine for its main gameplay. The game follows a small playthrough of a quiz game that utilizes a phone that players listen into in order to answer questions. To actually submit their answers, the user has a keypad of numbers like a normal phone booth would have, but these act as the inputs for the answers themselves. At the end of the game, the player gets yet another unique Mario trading card that spits out of the machine for a job well done. This game is pretty simple, but does feature some of the most unique Mario scenes that I've ever seen before. Like, not even really in its art style. Obviously, this game is based on Super Mario World, but the overall design of the characters and the scenes they're in are super unique and worth looking through, I think, just for the sake of nostalgia, especially if you really like Super Mario World. I like to think there was an instance of someone back in the day that thought this was a real phone booth and they really needed to call 911, and all they got when they picked up the phone was a shoddy Charles Martinet voice impersonator asking them, what the color of the M is on Mario's hat. Super Mario Kart DokiDoki Race was possibly the most RNG-related arcade game that Banpresto ever produced. This is because it's basically the Day at the Races minigame from Mario Party, but Mario Kart themed. Let's go, I love that minigame, I can't stop bringing it up. This is because the player must choose a racer at the start, and there's a random chance if that character will win or not. There's no controls for the game, and it's left up to the machine to decide who is lucky enough to win. But hey, at least you'll always know there'll be a winner, right? Listen, this one probably wouldn't have been one of my favorites in the arcade. Sure, I tried it once, probably for novelty's sake, but I usually stay away from these non-skilled based arcade games. I go in there to be a big gamer boy. The machine itself is one of the biggest we talked about thus far, and that's just due to how much is going on here, and the fact that the game can fit up to 5 people playing it at once. The game features 5 different racers: Mario, Luigi, Peach, Yoshi, and even Bowser. The music the game features is taken straight from Super Mario Kart, along with most of the visuals surrounding the machine itself, all ripped straight from the Super Nintendo game. Overall, this thing is super cool, but even if I had a huge area to put this thing in, the collector in me knows it's still way too big to ever be viable in a collection. DokiDoki Mario Chance is, you guessed it, another Banpresto Mario arcade machine. However, this one is based on Mario Party 4 from the GameCube era. This arcade machine is another simple metal game where your main objective is to fire tokens into a small hole in the middle of the machine to build up points. Other than that, there is some cool theming around the machine based on Mario Party 4's art, and this small little Mario figure protruding out of the middle of the machine. But, at the end of the day, this machine is very simple. There isn't a whole lot known about the game, but it was rumored to have appeared in the aforementioned Mario factory along with a lot of other Banpresto's other machines. Overall, it's a pretty cool part of Mario's history and an extension of Mario Party 4 I had no idea ever existed, but, beyond that, it's just a metal machine. Let's move on. Super Mario Attack was another Super Mario World themed arcade machine. I guess it was just the 90s, this game had more arcade games than some games have sequels. Anyway, the game is categorized as a redemption game, as the game would reward players with tickets in which they could use to redeem prizes, much like how arcades work here in the States. This was another Japanese exclusive arcade game, and like the others, it was fairly simple in concept. However, this game does take place fully on an LCD screen where players are tasked with landing Mario on a spot with a lot of potential points. That's what you're aiming for anyway. The game featured Mario with the cape power-up from Super Mario World, and it is up to the player when to land Mario, and based on where he lands corresponds to how many tickets the player gets. The game features several different levels from Super Mario World, and overall it's a pretty cool little package. It's a very short experience as the player only gets 15 seconds to decide where to land Mario, and if the player succeeds, they get a nice little payout and a congratulatory screen where Mario, Yoshi, and the princess can be seen. Other than that though, this game is also pretty basic, so let's go ahead and get on to the next entry. Super Mario World Mario 2 Yoshi no Boken Land is another one of those classic, not really a game, but still counts on this list Mario game. This game, like the Televidenois Super Mario World, utilized a telephone peripheral, but instead of being a full game, the game was an interactive animated 30-minute short. The player could make decisions throughout the episode, and they would plug those in via the phone attachment known as the Terabiko. This product was actually developed by Bandai and was used for quite a few games, including this Super Mario World anime game. Overall, the idea is pretty cool, and to be able to bring this type of gameplay into your home instead of experiencing it in an arcade and being forced to look like you're tracking down the people who took your daughter, you not get to do that in the privacy of your own home. It's pretty nice. The anime itself resembles that of the Super Mario World cartoon we got in the States a few years later, but it's still pretty unique in its visual style. I'm sure I would enjoy this animation since it's been fully uploaded to YouTube, but without a translation, I really have no idea what the boys are saying in this one. They could be cussing me out for all I know, calling me a fathead or something. I'd have no idea. I can't take that, dude. Mario's Memory Madness is the first of the Flash game in-browser web page game we've looked at thus far in the Iceberg. And let me tell you a little secret, it's the only one. These games are obviously as fun as, say, like the Tiger Electronic Game Watch. Maybe not that bad, but they are usually very simple freeware that is used to coincide with a game's release, you know, to promote it or something. Mario's Memory Madness and another game called Wario's Whack Attack were both used to promote and be used alongside the original Mario Party on N64. These were so early on that the game wasn't even actually developed using Adobe Flash and instead used something known as Adobe Director, which was a very early version of Adobe Flash. The games are super simple and play just like their titles suggest. Mario's Memory Madness is a memory matching game that gets harder as you play through the different stages. And Wario's Whack Attack sounds like a damn sex crime, but in reality it's just a simple whack-a-mole reskin for the Mario Party universe. The game uses the promo art from the original Mario Party and serves as a weird piece of Nintendo history that I never even knew existed. If you want a real nostalgia trip though and you're around my age, go back to and check out some of the old GameCube websites from back in the day. A choice favorite of mine was the Wario World website. It did have a bunch of additional information and it usually consisted of super creative ways to make the website feel like it was part of the game they were trying to promote. Stuff like unique animations and different videos and web page design things that you really sold it, you know? Definitely something I miss of the yesteryear of game development and promotion, even if it was, you know, just a weird side thing. Much like the Neslonic watches that came before it, the Super Mario Bros. 4 Neslonic Game Watch released as a simplified Game Watch version of Super Mario World on the Super Nintendo. The game is officially titled Super Mario Bros. 4, which is, I think, one of the few times Super Mario World has officially been labeled as the fourth iteration in the Super Mario Bros. Game series. Unlike other Game Watch games and even the ones that came before this one, this is by far the most fleshed out and definitive Game Watch Mario game there is. That is because of how much care went into trying to make it a viable product, at least in terms of someone gaming by staring at the back of their hand. This game not only had buttons to set the time to, you know, use it as an actual watch, but there was also 4 face buttons to play the game. Not only that, but there was a big fucking headphone jack on this thing, guys. That's right, something you couldn't even get on a $1,000 phone a few years ago was present here in the shitty little watch game. Your move, Apple. The game could be played in both silent mode and noise mode, depending on if you're trying to pull an all-nighter playing this John or not. The basic gameplay of this game has Mario traverse through the 4 different areas and end up fighting King Koopa in his clown car, much like the ending to the OG Super Mario World. The game itself is as accurately recreated as it could be for a watch game that looks like this. They nailed the theme of world exploration as much as they could with this one, seeing as Mario technically does traverse through different regions of the world, even if you have to squint to see what the hell's going on in each one. Overall, this is one of the coolest of these watches to own, as it even comes in this pretty over-the-top packaging. Like, Miyamoto, dude, it's not a damn Rolly. Why does this package feel like I'm about to propose to somebody with it? The time and passion that went into this project, I think, reflects well even all these years later. I really don't think I would have minded having this when I was a kid, and the collector in me wants it even more now, especially with this packaging. I mean, holy shit. I mean, just imagine wearing this when someone asks you what time it is. Droves of women, dude, falling over one another to talk to the guy with the Super Mario Bros. 4 Game Watch on. As we discussed in previous videos, the Mario Paint series was turned into the Mario Artist Studio games that released on the Nintendo 64 disk drive only in Japan. However, before all of this, Nintendo developers were fully expecting to make solely a sequel to the original Mario Paint instead of a much bigger, more ambitious project we got with Mario Paint Artist Studio. The last glimpse of evidence we have of this original Mario Paint 64 project is the Fly minigame that could actually be found in the files of Mario Artist Paint Studio itself. Since then, the full minigame has been released online, and it seems like it was pretty fleshed out for the time. However, this being the only evidence of a Mario Paint 64 makes me believe that it didn't get super far before being converted into the Mario Artist Paint Studio game we all know today. Don't get me wrong, guys, I would have loved to see the sequel for Mario Paint released on the N64 as an international release. As I've stated, that I personally feel like some of the charm from the first Mario Paint game on Super Nintendo is no longer there in the Mario Paint series, at least the Mario Artist Studio games. This is due to things like them deciding to cut the Fly minigame. It's almost like they forgot they could put some fun parts into these games as well. I mean, Mario Paint wasn't just a painting application at the end of the day, and obviously neither was the Mario Artist Studio series, but at least Mario Paint housed everything in one package, which I think made things easier to digest rather than just having to buy the separate programs for each Mario Studio game. However, I guess if you knew what you were going to be wanting to get out of the Mario Artist Studios, say you were interested in the Video Jockey Studio, then you could just buy that one instead of the other one, so maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. Regardless, having an official Mario Paint sequel not in the way of Mario Paint Artist Studio games, that would have been pretty cool to see in my opinion. Just imagine how fucked up the mouse would be for the N64 though. It probably would be shaped like a hand, but it would have a 6-finger slot that nobody could use off to the side weirdly in the corner. Because, you know, they were on that extended limb policy at Nintendo back in the day when they were developing the N64 controllers. Mario's Mission Earth was going to act as the wrap-up to the deceptive Mario edutainment games that appeared on the Super Nintendo back in the day. The game was seemingly cancelled very early in development as there's no solid evidence existing out there online of the game. In fact, the only official confirmation we have of the game is from the previous 2 games composer Mark Knight, who posted this game on his resume as an early project he was doing music for. The game likely would have been played similarly to both Mario's Missing and Mario's Time Machine, where there wouldn't be much gameplay at all, and rather you'd be learning about weirdly named planets and stars and shit. In fact, it's likely the only gameplay segment would be Mario flying between planets similar to Starfield's space traversal. Just kidding, I didn't play that dog pile of shit. Just kidding again, I can't judge a game fully until I play it, but I'm not gonna play it. Because it looks like shit. Nah, alright, I'll stop. Seriously, stop. I'll stop. Anyway, since there isn't much known about Mario's Mission Earth, the rest of this video could be me just thinking of cool things that could have been in this game. But I could do that for hours, so we should just move on. Dance Dance Revolution Mario Mix was apparently pretty profitable for Nintendo. In fact, so much that they were planning for a sequel to the game that would come out for the Nintendo Wii. The game was revealed as part of one of the large Nintendo leaks that took place a few years ago, where a spreadsheet stated that DDR Mario Mix 2 was not started yet, but, you know, it officially existed at some point. This game showed up on the Wii SDK code during the leak, and it's likely one of the 2 Mario games that were cancelled and revealed within the leak itself. Since the game was going to release on the Wii, it might have taken a different direction for the DDR series and maybe utilized motion control. But this is just a speculation, as there is very little to no information on the game out there, as it didn't even, it stated itself, you know, they didn't even fucking start it. I know if this had released back in the day, I would have likely hopped on it because I became the sucker Nintendo wanted me to be during the Wii era. I really did. I fell for all their shit. When I was younger, I was very easily sold on motion control gimmicks. After I experienced how well Wii Sports worked, I was sold, dude. Surely every Wii game will work out and just be as good as that game, right? Right? Hey, at least it's not a fucking Joy-Con, right? Mario's 35th anniversary left a lot to be desired, in my opinion, at least in terms of the big Mario releases they did for that event. That really revolving around Mario 3D All-Stars, where people were expecting Nintendo to release a solid package of all of 3D Mario's greatest hits. And well, we kinda got that. Obviously, this game isn't super popular right now for Mario fans and people who were hyped for this announcement, and hell, you can barely even buy it anymore. There's only 3 games here in this package, and while they are some of the best that have been released for Mario, it still left a lot out on the table. Mainly people were mad that they didn't include Mario Galaxy 2 in the collection, but many were also mad at how little they changed in the games that they did actually have in the collection. Other than the missing games on the 3D All-Stars collection, I'm not 100% sure what this entry could be talking about other than that. Perhaps it could be a mysterious canceled Mario game that was supposed to release during the 35th anniversary, but for whatever reason it was canned or pushed back for a later release. Or perhaps it's mentioning how during the 35th anniversary, Nintendo used its image to boast how many Mario games were actually playable on Nintendo Switch. And while yes, that's a lot, there are some obvious games missing, like the aforementioned Galaxy 2. And I'm sorry, if NES Open beat Mario Galaxy 2 on the Switch, I don't know if this one is happening. Obviously, I get it's harder to port a game like that over versus this, but they proved they can do it by having the first one playable in the collection. The only other thing I could think of that this entry could be referring to is the missing Mario 35 game that was operable for a while, but was taken offline a year or so ago, because it's technically missing and you can no longer play it. Whatever the case, this entry proves that Mario maybe deserved a little bit better for his 35th anniversary. But hey, it was still leagued better than his 25th. Holy shit. I Am a Teacher Super Mario Sweater is the second and final Super Mario sewing game that we ever got. It's a sad little franchise. As we discussed before, the only other Super Mario sewing game was the Mario Family on Game Boy Color, where they actually utilized a real-ass sewing machine. Rather, in Super Mario Sweater, you are simply buying a sewing software that comes pre-installed with Mario designs. Much more boring. This released on a floppy disk for the Famicom disk system in Japan only. Originally, it was planned to have a sewing machine attachment, much like the Mario Family attachment for Game Boy Color. However, after showing it off at the Winter 1987 CES show, it was realized that not many people were that interested in sewing and Mario combined. Huh, who would have thought? Therefore, instead of allowing players to sew the designs themselves, they would allow players to send in their floppy disks full of designs and have the company Oreo Kogyu do it instead. They would then send back a knitted sweater with your design of Purple Mario or something, and it was seemingly free, at least in terms of shipping. However, it's unknown if there was a processing fee, which there likely was. Ain't no way they were giving out free sweaters back in the day. Listen, I'm a sucker for sweaters, especially around this time of year, so this one is actually pretty cool to me. Also, I love the idea of you getting a quality sweater compared to the embroidery you could just throw on a Hanes white tee from the other Mario sewing game. It seems so much more worth your buck to get a sweater on the other end than some strange patch, but hey, that's just me. However, you shouldn't expect that you would have been able to fit into any of these sweaters, especially if you're a fat-ass American like me, as these sweaters were designed for a more Japanese audience, meaning the physique matches more to the average Japanese person, even more so towards kids over there. This is mainly because the machine's height for output is maxed at 4'11". I don't think this is really a statement on the height average of your average Japanese person, and more so the fact that this was likely used more for a kid audience, or was at least supposed to be, not some grown man-child talking about Mario games on the internet. Regardless, this is actually a pretty cool program, and a shame we never got to see something like this down the line, especially here in the States. They didn't want to use all that fabric for us fat asses. New Super Mario Bros. Wii Coin World is one of the latest Nintendo arcade slot machines that ever released. These things were definitely more popular back in the day, and that's just evident of how many new ones we get based on newer Mario games. Like, there's probably a reason we never got a Super Mario Odyssey slot machine. Not like that would have been fucking dope or anything. New Super Mario Bros. Coin World changes the game of slots up a little bit by adding in different objectives the player can go for. For example, to reach the jackpot of the game, the player must first collect 5 coins, then they will meet Bowser, who will have a spinning wheel where the player can win a grand prize if they're lucky enough. It's a race to get the 5 keys though, as much like the game it's based on, the slot machine has a focus on multiplayer. The machine fits up to 4 people playing at the same time and can get pretty hectic, which fits the game's theming, honestly. Much like Super Mario Bros. Wii, I feel like there's going to be some screaming over this machine cabinet. Other than that, much like the other slot machines on this Iceberg, there isn't much more to say about this one. I would like to say, though, I added this one to the Iceberg from a viewer suggestion in the last video, and as I'd never heard about it, so I included it today. Thanks to ERXER1. Thanks for the suggestion. Anyway, let's move on. Mario Bombs Away is another viewer suggested entry. This one came from the first video where the viewer described the game as Mario being sent to die in Vietnam. This game released in the Game & Watch line of games and featured wartime gameplay. That's the best way I can describe this shit, to be honest. The game features Mario as a Vietnam soldier. It's not actually Vietnam, I don't think, but it's most comparable in visuals anyway. And he's tasked with receiving a bomb from one comrade. Then he's tasked with doing the Saving Private Ryan D-Day push, you know the one, to the right side of the screen where he is tasked with handing off the bomb to another soldier in which he throws the lit bombs on each of the trees in the stage, killing their enemies. The trees are where the Charlies hang out, otherwise known as the enemy soldiers in the game. Their main obstacle they throw at the player is the fire that they try to light Mario's bomb with along the way. If the bomb is lit by either the enemies or this dumbass Nick-addicted fucking son of a bitch down here who just keeps puffing away, he can actually light your bomb in the most fucked up version of friendly fire I've ever seen in a video game. If all that happens, then the player is sent back to the beginning of the area where the bomb explodes, killing the first guy and Mario in one fell kaboom. Yeah, this game is a little grim to say the least, guys. Holy shit. It is a good window into what Nintendo saw Mario as back in these Game & Watch games, as they advertised him more as being an everyman. This was maybe a way to appeal to more Western audiences, as Mario could be seen working several blue-collar jobs like a construction worker and wrecking crew, a factory worker in Mario's cement factory, and a goddamn Vietnam soldier. This was definitely to appeal to the everyman who likely saw war in their lifetime, whether involved or otherwise. And yeah, while this is a simple 3-bit by 3-bit recreation of the war, but it's still war, and it still has an overlying dark feeling even if it's covered up by over-the-top reactions by Mario and these soldiers. At the end of the day, in the Mario canon, there is a version of Mario who got blown up like that agent in Breaking Bad with a tortoise head. Regardless, this game is one of the strangest Mario games I've ever stumbled across doing these videos. While it's not the most rare, the overall theming and purpose of the game puts Mario in a light he will likely never see again. And that's why I believe Mario Bombs Away is the most obscure Mario game I've found thus far. Let me know what you guys think the most obscure Mario game is in the comments down below. Personally, to you guys, I can't get over Wartime Mario, so I'm marking that one as mine. There are some that I ended up missing throughout the list, some real games and some that were canceled along the way. If you know of any that I might have missed throughout the Iceberg, let me know in the comments down below. Let's extend this conversation, even though this is the last video of this subject. As always, the original authors, Iceberg, can be found down, and all credit goes to them for the entries themselves, besides the few I added at the end. I might do a small bonus video in the future to cover any more obscure Mario games that I find in the future or left from you guys in the comments on this video. So if you want to see another obscure Mario games video, please let me know for suggestions and like the video down below. That always lets me know as well. But for now, this is putting a bow on the trilogy of obscure Mario games and an end to this Iceberg. Thanks so much for the support and traction I've gained from these videos throughout the last few months. Whether you're watching old or new, I hope you enjoyed and continue to enjoy well into the new year. This is my last Iceberg of 2023. That's not even true. I'm recording this on the 2nd of 2024. So I had that. I wrote the script a year ago. All right, a whole year ago I had the script read. I hope you all enjoyed rocking with your boy this far, and I hope you keep rocking with me well into 2024. Peace, guys.